What if my bursting boy, pause, got one for all?
Shut up!
Well, All Might would never give you one for all. But what if he did? Roll that clip. Is the clip, bro? So what if this was reversed? No, not actually. What if the situation was reversed, where Bakugo is actually saving Deku? I think this could have easily happened. I mean, they were just both walking home from school after all. But Bakugo's interaction would have definitely been different with All Might. It would have been something like this.
Hello, citizen. All Might. One day I'll be the damn #1 hero and even better than you.
This just in. I've been hired as an animator for Invincible, but let's focus on the writing of the story that I'm making up. After Bakugo saved Deku with nothing but hatred written all over his face, he just hates how weak Deku is. All Might saw that. He wanted to give him all for one after that, because he feels like the world needs a hero who would save anyone, even someone they hate. Now this is where it gets really interesting. How would the events of MHA be different? How would Bakugo using One for All compared to Deku be different? Talk about how Bakugo's powers with One for All would end up being different than Deku first, though. The first thing that I'm thinking of is Bakugo's body would have been much more physically prepared for One for All than Deku's would have. If you remember, Deku had to train for months before All Might even gave him One for All. Bakugo might not even need to train or not train as much. And the reason being is because Bakugo has already had a quirk for a long time, so his body is definitely much stronger. Can you imagine Bakugo using Black Whip to hang on to somebody and pull them towards him while he builds up a charge and goes right to their face? That would be sick. 2, to double down on what I just said, Bakugo also would have learned all the add-on quirks from One for All a lot quicker, since most of his life at this point he's been training his explosion quirk, and now he's training One for All. That's 2 quirks. Another few quirks, he's gonna pick those up a lot faster than Deku would have. Number 3, physically, I think Kacchan would have just ended up being stronger at his peak with One for All compared to Deku, again because he had a quirk most of his life. Adding on top with One for All, he would have been stronger than Deku, say against Shigaraki. Now 4, the last one, and this is actually a downside. I think the biggest downside of Bakugo getting One for All is that his explosion quirk would actually end up being a lot weaker than it was, say, at the end of MHA. Now Bakugo is training with One for All, he's training with Black Whip, he's training with Flow, and all the rest of them. So he would not be able to get his explosion quirk down nearly as well as he did in the regular series. You remember in MHA at the very end, Kacchan takes on a young All for One by himself pretty handily. So his explosion quirk wouldn't even be close to that level. Let me know if you guys think differently of that.
Stick around, because at the end I'll be talking about what I think would happen to Deku if Kacchan got One for All.
Let's talk about the events of MHA and how they would be different. Because with a boy like Bakugo with One for All, you know that shit's gonna be different. Starting off with the first arc, the entrance exam. I think Bakugo would have still gotten the most points, entrance exam. Even like 1 rescue point, because he's under All Might's wing. But it was a hesitant point, I would say. My freaking forehead shines, bro, with this light. God damn, send me to Turkey. But in the entrance exam, he's obviously gonna struggle more because now he has One for All. So he can get hurt a lot easier because honestly, he's used to going kind of all out. So going all out with One for All, that's gonna hurt. Now 2, the USJ. I think that would have gone down pretty similarly to regular MHA. I think actually Sue and Mineta would have been captured. Or worse, to be honest, because Deku was not there and Bakugo wouldn't have been sent on the boat with them. Also, Bakugo would have definitely tried to fight that Nomu, because if All Might isn't there to beat him, he would have felt like he's got to fight the Nomu. And Bakugo probably would have broken his entire body doing so. 3, the UA Sports Festival. Again, Kacchan would still won. Todoroki would have still held back against him, but Todoroki would have never used his fire side because Deku wasn't there to convince him to do so. His daddy issues would have laid dormant, unless Bakugo was all on him about them daddy issues, saying he wouldn't use his fire side because he's like a little bitch or whatever. Maybe that would have got him to use it. And maybe Todoroki would have won. I don't know. But if Bakugo didn't win and Todoroki didn't use his hot side, Kacchan still would have been intuitive enough to know that Todoroki was holding back for sure. 4, and this is where it really starts to get interesting, I think. the Stain arc. Instead of interning with the best Genus, he is definitely going to be interning with Gran Torino.
Guys, this is editing Shay / sick Shay. I talked to somebody about Kachan entering with Gran Torino instead of Best Genus. They said that they think he still might have been interned with Best Genus just because Best Genus saw Kachan's like anger problem and stuff, and that's kind of like why he wanted to take him on to help him chill out. I still kind of think he'd end up with Gran Torino just because of what All Might says, but let me know what you guys think. Be back probably.
And you know Gran Torino, you know that boy's going to be bouncing everywhere, pissing Bakugo the fuck off. You know what this means. Bakugo is definitely going to fight Stain with Ida and Shoto. And yeah, similar outcome happens, you know, fend Stain off. And Stain openly condemns Bakugo, saying he's not a true hero. Mostly because of Bakugo's brashness and seemingly is capitalized, recklessness. Now, if you guys watch MHA, you would know that Bakugo really seems reckless. But honestly, a lot of the stuff he does is very calculated. Like, you'll see him do some crazy shit that would look like it would destroy everybody, but he knew the building was going to fall right before that huge group of people. He planned that. And that goes over a lot of people's heads in the show, and probably just a lot of people's heads who's watching, too. So after this arc, with All Might being on him about the way he acts, pressure of being under All Might's wing, now Stain saying how All Might's the hero, and Bakugo isn't even a hero, this is starting to really weigh on him, where this is actually where we're going to see a genuine change in his personality and the way he acts. And I want to talk about that for a second as well. At the end of MHA, we saw how Bakugo started to chill out a little bit. You know, he wasn't crashing out in every single interaction he was having, keeping more to himself, being a little bit more quiet. He's being a little bit less of an asshole. Kachan is never going to be Deku. He's not going to cry like a water fountain every time a bug dies, like Deku. Deku's kind of a wimp. I love Deku, but he just cries over everything. That is not Kachan. I mean, we saw Kachan cry when Deku lost his powers. We did see some heartfelt moments with him. Kachan, personally, my favorite character. So I think Kachan will end up being similar to kind of like Endeavor. Like, I think he'd kind of get his shit together because he needs to step up to the occasion and be the hero that he needs to be. And that doesn't mean just be powerful and stop the villain. That means set a standard for like how you act. But what I do think would happen is that he'd save that crash outingness, that anger, to go berserk, kind of like Wolverine when he fights a big bad. He's legitimately like a rabid animal. But when he's not fighting, he'd be like quieter, more kept to himself. You know, he's not gonna like, if a kid comes up to him, he's not gonna be all like, oh, and all happy. He'll be like, maybe like pat the kid on the head and be like, go home, it's time to go home. Or some shit like that, you know what I mean? Like, be a protective presence, but not be like super like overly joyful. Number 5, Forest Training Camp arc. In this one, now that Kachan's less of a crash out and we're introduced to Koda, and he sees Koda, it's kind of like him, you know. Remember, Bakugo said that Koda's got some spunk after he kicked Deku in the balls. Bakugo actually would attempt to talk to Koda, to try to help him with whatever he's going through, in his own way. Because he reminds him of himself. You know, he'd have one of those moments where he'd be like, he reminds me of myself back then. You know how in anime, they always do that shit? Or they're like, back then. And they're like a kid. They're like 12 years old and they're talking about them when they were like 11 3/4. Oh, man. I remember when I took a shit back then. And it was like yesterday. Like, what are you talking about? Anyway, Bakugo is of course going to save Kota from Muscular. I think it would be a little more handily than Deku did it though. And we know how Kota kind of learns that, oh, heroes aren't all that bad from Deku. I think from Bakugo, he kind of learned it's okay to be angry and sad and those things. But you just have to put that energy into the right thing. Like saving a kid. Like Bakugo, especially saving a kid from being in the same position that Koda's in. And I think Koda ends up finding comfort in that. And then Bakugo does not get kidnapped by the League of Villains. It's actually Tokuyami. The League of Villains think they can utilize Dark Shadow, his power, because he can't really control it in the dark at night.
At night.
Don't hold back.
And then this goes into the League of Villains having Tokuyami and all the heroes coming and trying to save him. Well, we kind of know how that goes. They didn't get Bakugo, so they didn't get Tokuyami. And they actually set Tokuyami loose on Japan. All for One is still going to fight All Might, so All Might has to fight All for One while Tokuyami is rampaging through Japan. Our heroes gotta stop him while All Might stops All for One. That was 6, by the way. 7! 7? I'm sorry, guys. The license exam. Now that All Might lost his powers, and he can no longer be the symbol of hope. Society is shaky, and the pressure is on Bakugo now. And I think in this, Bakugo actually does the best he can, and he actually gets a lot of rescues, and he does what he's supposed to do, and he actually passes his exam. 8, Overhaul arc. Might be my favorite arc. That shit was fire. So obviously Bakugo's gonna work for the Night Eye Agency, along with Lemillion, but when Kacchan figures out that Lemillion was a candidate for One for All, that fucks with him. That fucks with him hard. Especially now that he's like trying to be a better hero and stuff. That really does a number on him, I think. There wasn't beyond a reasonable doubt, I guess, to be him. Like there was other people that almost got it. And I think that just messes with him. And I think we do see him nerd out trying to impress Night Eye because Lemillion tells him how much of a fan Night Eye is of All Might. So I think Bakugo nerds out a little bit because, you know, he's trying to be this hero. He's trying to impress All Might. So we see a part of him that we really haven't seen. I think through this whole arc, the Lemillion thing is messing with his head and he kind of keeps messing up. I think this weighs on him way more than it did Deku, but he does end up locking in when it matters. When he fights Overhaul. After that arc kind of ends, the guilt of Lemillion losing his powers really does some damage on Bakugo even more. Him winning against Overhaul definitely gave him the confidence he needed after he found out Lemillion almost got One for All or was a candidate to. Like all the other arcs and the rest of the story, they go pretty similarly, I think. Or I just don't feel like breaking down every single arc and how they'd be different. It gets pretty different again during the Paranormal Liberation War. I think the biggest difference, though, is that just Endeavor and Bakugo fucking fry Shigaraki together. 10. The Dark Hero arc. Kacchan goes off on his own, carrying a ridiculous amount of guilt for all the destruction that happened because he didn't stop Shigaraki earlier. He wasn't strong enough to stop Shigaraki by himself. All these different things. Like, he just feels like a piece of shit. And he is vigilanteing like crazy. He is destroying all these villains, going absolutely crazy. That berserk mode I mentioned earlier. Now that he's alone in a city that's just in rubble, he is like Batmaning them. He is brutalizing these villains like Batman would. And yeah, his friends come get him, just like what happened to Deku. Kacchan breaks down for the first time to anybody. He breaks down to his friends how just guilty he feels. And he just cries, breaks down, and they bring him back to UA. 11. Final War arc. I think, honestly, since Bakugo was put in the Sky Tomb with Shigaraki and everybody else, I think here he is definitely powerful enough to beat Shigaraki with everybody too. Like, I actually think he takes Shigaraki pretty handily with the best Genus, Edge Shot, Aizawa using his powers, and what's his face copying his powers. Like, I think they actually get it done. Not quick, not easy, but they do get it done, I think. But then he has to fight Prime One for All. And we saw what Bakugo did to Prime One for All. That was crazy. But this isn't the same Bakugo. He doesn't have... His explosion quirk is not that strong in this. It's just not. That'd be insane if it was. And maybe it could get to that point if he keeps One for All. Well, I think they beat One for All. Like, I mean, it's him. All the other heroes are still there. Maybe one or two of the heroes dies to Shigaraki. I don't know. That could have happened. Like, if they beat Shigaraki and no one dies, like, they're going to beat One for All, like, pretty handily. And I think Bakugo keeps One for All, which is cool to think about, because imagine his explosion quirk, if it gets as strong as it was at the end of MHA, plus One for All, like, 8 years later, or whatever the time skip is.
Guys, it's me again. I'm still sick. I want to say another thing I talked to my boy about. If Bakugo kept One for All, then I forgot that as a user of One for All, as you use all the powers and stuff, it decreases your lifespan by quite a bit. So if he did keep All for One, in the time skip, that might be towards like the very end of his life, to be honest. But let me know what you guys think of that too.
That is like triple the strength of All Might. Number 12. The epilogue. So Bakugo is definitely the number 1 hero. You know, it's not like the time skip where I don't remember what he was, like number 5 or something like that. Because he learns to reserve his anger, only goes berserk on super strong heroes, and he has a sidekick. I told you guys I would get to this, okay? I told you guys I would get to this. Sidekick is actually someone he used to go to school with. It's someone he would need to make amends with in any universe and any timeline. Izuku Midoriya. After Bakugo got One for All and Deku did not, Deku gave up on being a hero because he was told by All Might that he couldn't be a hero without a quirk. And Deku did not go save Kacchan later that day. Kacchan saved Deku. Izuku would soon have that fire lit back in him though, once he saw his old classmates save the world. Deku would look back on his old notes he used to take, but he knew he didn't have powers, and he'd have to reinvent himself somewhat. He started focusing on the support course, but he still had the goal of becoming a hero in the back of his mind. He'd make gear and gadgets that would emulate Bakugo's powers, but that's just where it started. He started making gadgets that copied tons of different powers, and he fast-tracked his way through the support course, and he ended up using his gadgets to do hero work until one day he bumped into Bakugo, and Bakugo had a lot to say, so they caught up. Bakugo apologized for always putting Deku down as much as he did. He told him that it always felt like you were ahead of me. Even though I was the one clearly ahead with my powers, it felt like you had something over me that I didn't have. And Deku walked him through his story about how he stopped trying to be a hero, and that Bakugo is actually the one who made him want to be a hero again. And Kacchan ended up taking him on as a sidekick, and Izuku used Deku as his hero name because that's what his hero used to call him. Wow. Guys, that is the video. Tell me if you think I got like any of this right, if any of this makes sense. I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff that would have happened, but I could not go over literally everything because MHA is like 150 episodes or something, so that would be pretty hard. If there's anything else you guys could think of that might have happened, let me know in the comments. If there's anything you think I completely got wrong, also let me know. I'll see you in the next one.